welcome into another three-man rush here on the Buffalo Rumblings Network. Sarah and I are working this thing out. We're figuring it out slowly but surely.
Uh,
It is a learning process. As you've seen the last couple of weeks, we are not quite a three-man rush. We're more of a two-man rush, trying to defend the Hail Mary in the end zone, so to speak. But we're going to roll with this for a while. We still like the name. We still like everything with it, and we're going to see how it goes. And we appreciate you joining us tonight here on the three-man rush. She is Sara Larson. I'm the big O, Jerry Ostroski. And you know what? We are brought to you, football fans, by the good people at Picasso's Pizza. And welcome to this episode of the three-man rush on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network, presented by Picasso's Pizza. Treat yourself to the most flavorful pizza on game day. Picasso's, we are Buffalo Pizza, shipping locally and nationwide. Order online at picassospizza.net. So, Sarah, how you doing? Before we get into the college stuff, how was your week last week? You actually watched a football game where it was supposed to be played, I see.
yeah, yeah. It was actually it was fun. Playing going on Thursday and actually having a
Right.
weekend too. So I had my own little mini bye week. So I was able to be lazy and have a day of football on Sunday, which felt good. Going out to Boston was fun last week. It was a little cold, but I got to get used to it because the next couple of weeks I'm definitely gonna get cold. So, but it was nice, and I'm sure the players enjoy the bye week. So did I. The mini bye week. So did I.
Well, I will say this. I was following you on social media. I was following some of the other people that were brave enough to head to Boston. Of course, I was following all the Bills Mafia babes. They seem to be the ones that really fire up on the social media. If you want to know what's going on, if you want to know where the party's at, where the jump off is, if you want to know where things are happening, you need to follow Sarah and all the Bills Mafia babes. They have a knack of finding where the action is, and I couldn't help but notice that maybe you were treated a little bit rudely by the Bostonians this past week.
Yeah, yeah. It was actually funny the first day, walking around. I actually do it on purpose. If it's baseball season, I'll wear my Yankee stuff. If it's football season, I'll wear my Bill stuff. Once in a while, you'll catch me out in my Heat stuff. I am legit the worst person to be in Boston when it comes to sports. My son goes to school there, but I am not a Boston sports fan whatsoever. Hockey, basketball, football, baseball, any of it. So I told my son if he comes home one of those fans, he's going to be disowned. So he has very strict rules about being gone up that way. What he's allowed to root for and what he's not. But I actually have a really quick, kind of cool story. I was walking back. I went to go see I went to Starbucks. That was my main purpose, was to go get a coffee. But as I was
Exactly.
walking, I passed the Cheers bar. So I was taking a couple of pictures and I'm thinking about my dad, and I'm walking back and I'm in my own head, but I'm walking and I'm staring at as I cross the street at this guy, and I'm like, God, he looks familiar, in a way that, like, in 20 seconds you're trying to process all this stuff.
Right.
And I'm like, eye contact, he looks at me, I look at him, and I I go to, like, it finally occurs to me who he is, and he goes, "Go Bills." And I let out the worst, like, weirdest yelp type thing, and I was like, "Oh, go Bills." I realized as I walked past him that it was Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I'm walking down Boston, like, going, I just, like, yelped at Ryan Fitzpatrick. And he probably didn't even, he was like, this girl's not a Bills fan. She didn't even recognize who I was until it was like almost 2 seconds too late. But I totally recognized who he was. It was just, you don't expect to be walking down the street and having, someone say hi. And to me, I have no idea who was with him. It could have been the whole Thursday night football crew. I have absolutely no,
Exactly.
because I zoned in, and it was one of those moments where I can laugh at now. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, if you're ever listening to this, I knew who you were. It wasn't just a dumb blonde moment, I swear.
I
But
couldn't believe, I can't believe that guy and his folk, he's like his following. I mean, we're going up in 2 weeks. We're going to the Dolphins game. Me and my two oldest boys and my oldest son's girlfriend. We're going up to the game. And Owen today, the one that's at Tulsa that plays
Tulsa.
D. He's like, Dad, I'm going to go to the store. I've got to get insulated Carhartts. I got to go this. I go. He's actually trying to come up with an outfit to look like Ryan Fitzpatrick. Last time he was at the game, I don't know if you remember that, he was wearing, back when he was up in the
You
stands
mean
there
when he
going
had
nuts.
no shirt? When he had no
Yes,
shirt?
yes. But he had the Carhartt overalls. Yes. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of influence he has on on the youth
Yeah.
nowadays. But no, I'm looking forward to it. I was glad you had a good time. Obviously, a good football game. We'll get into that a little bit
Yep.
more later.
Yep.
But Sarah, take us through. We're going to get back into college football. Obviously, regular
Right.
season games are pretty much over, except for what some people call the game with the most meaning every year, besides the national championship game, and that's the Army Navy game that I believe takes place in Philadelphia this year. That game, obviously,
Right.
a wonderful game, and they really, really highlight the players and the families and just what it means to be a cadet or a midshipman. But our final college football poll was released this week, and you know, obviously, and when we'll get into that in a second. But when you talk about the Army Navy game, and have you ever been? By the way,
I
have
have
you ever
not. And my dad was Army. He didn't play football for them, but
been?
he was in the Army. So we would joke every year. And, I would say, how in the heck, can Navy win this game ever? Because, joking as I was growing up, I'm like,
Right,
they play on ships, like when I was a lot, really young kid.
right,
So it was always a joke. So, but we would always watch it, and it's fun. It doesn't matter what their records are heading in. One can be really good and the other one really bad, and the score shows otherwise.
right.
But it's just a classic at this point in time, and it's always one of those fun things to watch. I think it's like 120 something years at this point
Yep,
that it's been going on. So I guess my main point that the last few years it's alternated winners. I think going back 4 years, Navy, Army, no, excuse me, Army, Navy, Army, Navy. Last year was Navy. So if we keep on going with the trend, then Army would win this year. So I've always rooted for Army. I do have a couple of friends who are Navy, so it gets a little fun. But I don't have any, specific
right.
care. It's just fun to watch, and it's the conclusion of the season, for the most part, heading into bowl season. So
My son Owen was actually offered to play football at both Army and Navy.
okay.
And then one time he had committed to play football at West Point, and unfortunately, like a lot of kids in that 2020 class, he was kind of a victim of COVID. Couldn't go anywhere, couldn't see any campuses, couldn't
Yep.
visit any places. And
My son feels your pain there
yeah,
because my son went through it too.
yep, and when it all shook out, he ended up going to the University of Tulsa because he was comfortable with the university, knew what it was like, he loved the place, and obviously there was no unknown because unlike the other places because you couldn't go with COVID. But watch this game many times. It usually takes place in the city of Philadelphia, where I grew up, and if you have military family, like you have, always means something. There's always something you're cheering for. There's always something you're pulling for. And like I said, the TV, CBS has done a wonderful job of really, I don't know the term I want to look for, humanizing, really kind of making the special story and really pulling out the special moments between the players and their families. And I don't know if you've ever seen the beginning of the game. They do they usually get Tom Rinaldi or somebody like that has one of those just amazing voices to tell stories. And they go and they do these stories, and they usually bring the moms into it, and they interview the moms and what it's like to walk on campus that day in July and just give your child up for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And they tell these stories, and I'm like, if you're not crying, I'm not sure you're human, because
Right.
they're just amazing stories. But that game this weekend, concept uniforms again for both sides. I think Navy's wearing a NASA type uniform, and I'm not quite sure what Army's wearing, but they've always honored one of their battalions throughout the various wars that our country unfortunately was involved in. But We talked about it a little bit ago. Obviously, the Final Four of the college football playoff was announced this week. I'm curious to hear what you think about this because you and I have talked about this
Right.
quite a bit. And I don't want to say
Yeah.
ad nauseum, but we do talk about this quite a bit. And we tend to differ on a few teams. Um, and obviously, I think the one area of discussion you can talk about is TCU
Yeah.
loses the Big 12 championship to Kansas State, and they are still ranked number 3. I
Right.
have my feelings on that. What are your feelings on the Horned Frogs being 3 over a number 4 Ohio State Buckeye team?
Yeah. So just to go back and kind of, relook at last week, we both picked Georgia, we both picked Michigan, and then you had picked
I
TCU
picked TCU. Yep.
and I had picked Kansas State, but then you had picked Utah and I had picked USC. So we were both 3-1 last week.
Yep.
Um, Obviously, with USC losing, I knew that they were going to fall out and Ohio State was going to move in. The question was whether or not TCU losing would either push them out or push them at least to 4 and then move Ohio State into 3. But that would have meant, in my opinion, that Michigan would have played Ohio State and the first round of the playoffs. So I think what they did was they looked at TCU and said, Ohio State didn't have a championship game. Alabama didn't have a championship game.
Right.
We should not be penalizing TCU for having that game, for having that
Exactly.
playoff game. So, or that championship game. So, I think that that's what the committee finally decided in leaving them at 3. It was a pretty close game. Um, but I did feel K-State was going to pull it off. I didn't think that they were going to let them have it 2 games in a row. I thought it would be a little closer than it was. So I was actually really impressed with K-State. But I actually thought that what the playoff committee did was right to a certain extent. Now, if you look at TCU's resume, they struggled a lot throughout the year. Do I think they are the number 3 team in the country? No, I do not. But do I
Who is?
think I think that Ohio State should have been 3 and Alabama should have been 4 if you were looking at the best teams in the nation. But that's not how the playoff system works. It is a weekly thing and then it kind of cumulative, but at the end, but you still look at the week before. So in my opinion, they could not take out because TCU was undefeated up into their championship game. You couldn't kick them out for a 2-loss Alabama.
Right.
But in my opinion, TCU losing to K State and struggling throughout much of the season. Now they struggled, but they won. I don't think they are the third ranked
Well,
team in the country.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I differ from you on the whole TCU struggled, especially with Max Duggan, their quarterback, Dugan going up to being invited to the Heisman Trophy
Mhm.
finals up in New York City. Kansas State is a tremendously good football team, tremendously underrated football team. They're rough, they're rugged, they come out, they smack you in the mouth. Um, Max, he about he about put the team. We basically, you can say, put the team on his back and pulled him out of the deficit in the fourth quarter. Got to the overtime. They decided to go for it on fourth and a foot. I'm not quite sure how you take the ball out of the quarterback's hands when he basically drug K State all over the field in the second half to will the Horned Frogs
Right.
to tie it up. So I don't know how you took the ball out of his hands, but they did.
And
Sometimes,
jokingly, Jerry, I did say that I felt like that K-State was going to get the early lead and that TCU was going to find a way to fight back
right,
in the second half because that's what they've done all
right,
season long. So I agree that they are a good team. They are a second half team. Was a little bit more concerned with their defense and
right,
the college football committee, the selection committee does look at defense a lot. But again, you can't penalize. They had the Big 12 conference championship. You can't penalize them because Ohio State and Alabama and them did not. So I think that they did it right. But go
you can
ahead.
look a lot. You can look a lot at slow starts. But to me, a team that's a second half team has a very good coaching staff because they make adjustments
Adjustments.
and they're able to take what they learned in that first half and adjust and come out in the second half and play well. I, I think Ohio State's probably a better football team than them, and I agree with you 100% that they put them at 4 to keep them away from Michigan, so that there wasn't that, what's a better moneymaker if you have Michigan and Ohio State in the final for the national championship? I mean, everybody wins, right? Well,
Yeah.
except for me, because well, I still would win too because I like Michigan, but Alabama had no right being anywhere near the Final Four in my estimation. If they did get anywhere near it, it was because of Saban. It was because of their reputation. I thought they played poorly all year long. I think they were sporadic, and I think that they finally felt the effects of a bunch of guys coming out early and going into the league, and they lost kind of that veteran leadership, maybe a little bit veteran backups. So they're rebuilding. I think they'll be back there next year. Um, you know, it was a really weird year in the fact that 5, 6, I guess you could say 5 to 10 could interchange at any time. I mean, I thought
Right.
USC was a joke. You can't play defense the way they do. I think USC is not a very physical football team. I don't think they're that way. They'll never be that way as long as Lincoln Riley's there. That's why Utah won that game because they lined up and hit him straight in the face, and
Yeah.
USC could not respond to it. Um,
And
so,
Utah played, I mean, they played better than the first game against them.
yeah,
Like USC did not have an answer. And
hell,
it
Utah looked
wasn't.
like a Final Four team to me.
Yeah. And USC, like, usually their strength has been their offense all year.
Right,
And they couldn't get it going at all. So I was very impressed with how Utah played that game. It's one of those things, but I'm actually looking forward to expanding to 12 teams. A lot of people, have their issues. Generally speaking, a 12 team would look like most likely the first, the 14 playoffs would have their first week off.
right.
And then, teams 5 through 12 would play each other. I think it would be interesting to get some of these teams that had a really good end of the year. So that, yeah, they might have lost 2 games earlier in the season, or one or two games. There's even a couple people like K-State, they lost 3. If they get that opportunity, because they've done so well towards the end of the year, to show what they've got, play in a couple of rounds, and if you keep on going, hey, that just goes to show. I like it. I'm looking forward to it, because like you said, 5 through 10 this year could have been anybody. Like, it really could have been. You could have really argued for quite a few teams. So I'm looking forward to it expanding, and it's now expanding 2 years sooner. It was supposed to not happen to 2026, and now
Right.
it's happening 2024. So
The Rose
it'll
Bowl finally joined us.
Yes, so it'll be cool to see that unfold. There's some people that are never going to be happy. Now they're going to think it's too much. I'm actually looking forward to it. I know that it's also going to prepare these teams that have a lot of talent on their programs. Obviously, if they're the top 12 teams in the nation, the juniors and seniors that are probably going to be declaring, it's also going to be prepping them, because they're going to get not only more games, and they're getting all those more practices. They're going to start to learn what an actual NFL season is going to be like, because that's the biggest difference. They go from 12 games in college to 17 plus playoffs in the NFL. So I'm actually looking forward to it. So,
I
but
think,
to Go ahead.
real quick before we jump over, I think this year was a prime example. And by the way, if you like the show, Three Man Russ, smash the like button, subscribe to us. We'll be here every week, especially through the off season. We'll start talking about draft and college football players and all of that stuff. We're going to get into a lot of stuff this off season as well. But hit that like, hit that subscribe button. But real fast before we switch to our next topic, I think this year was a prime example, man. They kind of I don't want to say they forced TCU on us because they had to have them there. They had to because of their record, but really USC, some of these other teams, it was like they were trying to force other teams on us because if there ever was an argument that this is a SEC Big Ten college football playoff, and that's what everybody thinks this is going to eventually go to, this year was a prime example of that. It wasn't very good.
Yeah, I think what that's expanding it to 12, it's going to bring in the other conferences. So I have a feeling that what they'll do is they'll make it so the Power Five, everyone who wins the conference championship gets an automatic bid. So is what I'm assuming. I haven't heard that, but I believe that that's what should happen. And then based on where they are in the rankings, it's not going to necessarily be 1 through 12. It'll be the Power Five conference champions, and then whoever else falls in based on the numbers, available. So we'll see how they end up doing that. But if that's the case, I like it because then you start to tend to see, ACC, were they really just that bad this year? Was if their best team was Clemson,
Yeah.
Florida State did well towards the end of the year. Do they deserve a chance to show what they have? North Carolina lost badly to Clemson in the ACC. Well, again, is that because the ACC is bad, or is that because everyone in the ACC is so good that it ends up looking like they're bad because they're playing each other? So it'll be I can't wait for the 12 team expansion. So it'll definitely be fun to see that unfold. But we have
Yes.
Syracuse and Buffalo to talk about.
Both
So
going bowling.
both going bowling. So Syracuse is been accepted. Well, they were offered and they accepted the bid to the Pinstripe Bowl in New York City.
Yep.
That takes place on the 29th of December at 2 p.m. And I am a little concerned for Dino and the team. Minnesota has
Right.
been a thorn in my side. With a bowl season with and so is Wisconsin. Those cold weather teams. Even playing down here in Miami, it was hard. They're just hard, like hard nosed, guys that go out there and just kind of beat it out of you. So Minnesota's been going through a little bit of changes. They weren't as good this year as they expected, but they ended up being 8-5. And then, obviously Syracuse had the tale of two halves of the season. They started out 6-0 and they ended up 1-5. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope they figure it out. My opinion is they've lost quite a few people already to the transfer portal, and we'll see how that affects them. But I'm just happy they've gotten a bowl. It will help for recruiting and everything going forward. But do you have any opinion on this game
Well,
or?
Syracuse, Syracuse losing people to the portal is one thing, but news today, it just came across Twitter. Pete Thamel reports Nebraska is going to hire Syracuse's defense coordinator Tony White as their next defensive
Wow.
coordinator. He runs a 3-3-5 defense, something I'm familiar with, as that's what my son runs here at the University of Tulsa. He did this past season. They are also in the middle of a coaching
Coaching change.
change, but White is going to take he's taken prior assistant experience from Arizona State, New Mexico, San Diego State. He's had multiple offers, but he's decided to join Matt Rule out of Nebraska, and we'll talk about that coaching change here in a second. But Syracuse definitely under transition, and that's the deal with them. I mean, it's the way it is with a lot of teams of that nature. Syracuse is a private university in upstate New York. We all know this. Um, they're not. They're kind of a. Their success comes every cycle. And what I mean by that, a cycle is 4 years, freshman to senior class. Now, granted, they can stay for a fifth, but a place like Syracuse is going to get you a year, a couple good seasons every cycle, and I think that's not a ridiculous expectation. It's also not a slam in their case. I mean, when you start talking about finances and things like that, it's tough to win in Syracuse, and what Baber's done, especially coming off a 2-win season, is pretty exceptional. And then also you got Buffalo, and being in the MAC, you win 6 games, you get a chance to go to a bowl. That's big, no
Yeah.
matter no matter what. I don't care if you win your 6 games in Buffalo and the bowl game you go to is played in Lake Placid. I don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Right,
matter.
right. Well, they
You
got
know.
the Camila Bowl. They got the
Right.
Camila Bowl on December 27th. I mean, I'm glad that they got to play Akron on Friday.
Right.
Um, but to only be a two-win team by 1 point. I mean, I'm ecstatic that they get the bowl game. But it kind of showed that the pressure of that moment of, we have to win this game or we don't go bowling.
Right.
It seemed like it got to them a little bit. So I'm glad that they've got it. I think that they deserve it. They had a little bit of an up and down
Of
season.
course they did.
Um,
They won 6 games.
Yeah, so I look forward to it, and of course, I'll watch it and check it out and see how well they do. I actually have a friend who lives down here, in South Florida. Her son went to UB last year. I think it was his senior year. Senior year was last year.
Okay.
So so she always messages me and talks about the Bulls. So it'll be fun to talk to her about them actually getting a bowl game. So
Do we have any idea? I'm embarrassed. I admit I don't know where it is. Where is the Camellia Bowl played?
it
You
is
know?
in yeah, it's Alabama, Montgomery,
Okay.
Alabama.
Okay, so they're playing Montgomery. So they're probably playing in the old Blue Gray Stadium there in Montgomery, which I've been by. Cool place. Lots and lots of history there. So
Yeah, and
that's
it's got to be
awesome.
fun for these guys to travel, and get that bowl experience. So
Right.
I'm looking forward to be able to read about all that and see that how they do and everything with the bowl game.
Well, by next show we'll have to start getting into our bowl matchups and maybe
Yep.
picking some bowl games every week.
Yeah.
That's always a fun thing to do. We'll get
Yep.
into some of that as well. But obviously, we talked a little bit about it with Matt Rule going to Nebraska. I'll talk about that in a moment. What I feel about that hire, as well as another. But what comes with the end of the football season also comes with people losing jobs, and there's been quite a few early firings in Division One football as far as head coaches go. Some guys have been let go. Some guys have moved around and joined new teams. Sarah, I'm gonna get into a little bit of the Luke Fickle at Wisconsin and also the Matt Rule at Nebraska, but
Right.
couple of coaching changes maybe that have caught your eye that you're excited to see what happens over the next couple of years.
Yeah, so obviously the biggest name on the board would be Deion Sanders. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do at Colorado. I am not qualified to comment or discuss whether or not him leaving an HBCU is the right thing to do. Obviously I hate it for Jackson State, but I love it for Deion. So I'm looking forward to seeing I kind of want to see if he can actually coach. Is it just his charisma and his, larger than life persona and his ability to get these 4 and 5 star recruits to flip and go to his program. I want to see if he's going to actually be able to coach at a Power 5 school. And he's got his work cut out for him. Colorado only won one game this past season, so he's definitely got his work cut out for him. He's already got a 5 star, I guess, today, flipped their commitment. So it works for him. I just want to see if it's going to work for him on actual on the field because even being at JSU, it's not like they went undefeated
Right.
every year that he was there.
Right.
So he was losing to other HBCUs. So um it's going to be a different level for him. And he had, one of the number one players in the country on his team. So I'd like to see. I said his first year he's going to go 6-6, and I got kind of uh talked down about that a little bit. But I just think that he has a lot of changes that he needs to go through. He did get Charles Kelly from Alabama, which I think is going to be a very good hire. I know him because he was the defensive coordinator at FSU during a very painful point in time for my UM. So he's a very good
When is
defensive
it not a
coordinator.
painful point in time for your UM?
20 something years ago.
We could do a whole
Um,
nother podcast on that
yeah,
misery.
that's true. That's true. We'll digress from we won't talk about that right now. I don't want to cry. Yeah, a very disappointing season for the University of Miami. But anyways, Charles Kelly, I know him because of his FSU years.
Right.
I think that he's going to do very well. I don't think he was able to do as much as he wanted to at Alabama. Obviously, he wasn't the defensive coordinator at Alabama. He was like the assistant or associate defensive coordinator. But then they also got the Kent State head coach as the offensive coordinator.
Now
Can't
you're
think of
now
his
you're getting to what's going to
Yes.
make them win
I
games.
can't think of his first name, but his last name is Lewis.
Right.
Sean Lewis. Sean Lewis.
Okay.
So I think that that's going to be also interesting because he's already got some high impact guys that is going to make a difference where he doesn't have to really. I don't want to say he doesn't have to coach, but he can let his offensive and defensive coordinator do their jobs, and he can be the face of the university, which he already is in 3 days, and be out there recruiting and helping turn around the university and the system that they're in. I think that you say Deion Sanders' name, and then you say the Colorado Buffaloes. They just don't seem to mix. But he's already kind of added this little, swag and everything. And I've seen a couple of the different conversations and interviews and stuff that they have. I'm looking forward to it. If I have a team that I'm going to root for this year other than, my Hurricanes, I will definitely root for them. I'm pulling for him to succeed.
One thing about Dion is he's very smart, and he's taken all of today's trends and things that are the kids like, and he's taken them to the nth degree. So, for instance, he has a production team with him at all times, and I think it's brilliant. There is no leaks, there is no hearsay, there is no rumor. They film what he says, they produce it, and then they release it. And you can see it on YouTube, you can see it on social media, Twitter, Instagram. It is constantly out there. The other deal that Dion understands is you got to have good coaches. Dion's not coming there to be the coach. Dion's coming there to be the CEO of this football team.
Pretty
He's a
much, yeah.
CEO. He's the head of marketing. He is the head of recruitment, and that is what he is there to do. He is hiring high-profile coaches to be just that, high-profile, very good coaches. But also, I think Dion understands this. Being a player at Florida State, going into the league, and Dion I think played on about 5 teams in the NFL. But when you look at this, he understands one thing: players. You have a good coach, but players win games. You have to have talent, and everything he's doing is about talent acquisition. And what I'll be interested to see, and the thing about Dion is there's some words nowadays you can't say in sports that turn people off. There's things like discipline, accountability. I had a conversation last night with really a friend of mine, and to walk in and say we're going to be disciplined, well, you can't say that because that sets off a trigger. You can't say things like accountability, but you can preach them. Okay, you can preach them by what you do and how you act, and that's what he does. I mean, he's there every day early. He works hard, and as he says, as Jay Spence just said in the chat, he ain't hard to find. So if you want to know what's going on, just go find him. So
Mm.
I think it's going to be interesting. I, like you, am really, really interested why he chose Colorado. Other than he said that he said it was beautiful, the air was clean, and there was no crime. That's what he said in his
Yeah, I have
first
a
in his
feeling
first
going
press conference.
going from a $300,000 paycheck to a $5.5 million paycheck
Right.
might have been a little bit of a push in the right direction.
That was
You
part of
know,
it.
some people said that there might not have been any other offers. Again, he's going from an HBCU with talent and stuff, but again, he wasn't perfect. And, some people question whether or not it was, did he do what he did at that level um based on a few players that he had, or was it because he was an actual good coach? So he can answer those questions, next
But you
year.
have to remember this, and I don't know. I'm not going to put this out there. I've been taught a long time ago not to ask a lady her age. So I'm not going to do that. By all means, believe me, I've been taught well. But
I'm
when I
old
was a
enough.
kid, this at one time there was a coach at Colorado named Mike McCartney, and he had players like Salinesi, Eric Bieniemy. He had my man that was the quarterback. He's off the top of my head. I can't remember his name, but he was at Pittsburgh for a while. Cordell Stewart. They had Cordell Stewart. They had Michael Westbrook at receiver. They had Brown at linebacker. They had Joel Steed at nose guard. They had big, big, big time talent. None of it came from the state of Colorado. All of it came from LA and New Jersey and other areas. So it'll be interesting to see if they allow this to happen again, because while they all talk a big game, the board of trustees and everybody has to allow some things to happen too, for Dion to put the team together that he wants to put together. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited about it. I'm a huge Dion fan. I love his transparency. I love what he's doing. But another coaching job that changed hands. Obviously, Wisconsin's job was open, and I think Wisconsin went ahead and hired the number one free agent in in football. I didn't say free agent, but number one coach in football, which was Luke Fickell. And Fickell was a 3-time AAC head coach of the year in the AAC at Cincinnati. If you remember last year, if we were had the show last year, we'd have been talking every week about does Cincinnati belong in the Final Four? Obviously, they did. That outcome was not very good when they played Alabama. But 49-year-old Fickell, he's 93. He played at OSU, Ohio State from 93 to 96. He was the interim head coach in 11. I believe that was after Tressel was forced to resign. He was at Cincinnati from 17 to 22. His head coaching record is 62 and 24, 2-3 in bowl games, and again 0-1 in college football playoff. And when you look at this this hire by Wisconsin, it reeks. It just reeks Big Ten, right? I mean, this is just a Big Ten hire. We're going to have a big, tough, physical football team with a big, tough head coach who played at Ohio State, and he believes in defense and running the football and all those things. So to me, this goes hand in hand. But I think the thing about Fickell, he's very smart. He's a tremendous recruiter, and he's gotten in some areas in the United States that many thought that Cincinnati wasn't going to be successful in, but they were. And I think that Wisconsin's going to be a contender for the Big Ten title pretty soon, because not only do I think Fickell's a good coach, I think he's going to bring the right players in, the right type of players that are going to make them that type of team that can compete for a title. So I really think the Fickell hire was very, very good by Wisconsin.
I agree, and I think that Wisconsin, University of Minnesota, Iowa, like you go with these, Midwest northern teams, and they all kind of start to look a little bit alike. They're,
Right.
they're going to pound you on defense. They're going to have a great running game. And then quite a few of them have the tight ends that come around, and then usually a crazy offensive line. Wisconsin had that 2 years ago, and then this year just kind of fell off. So I'm looking forward to Wisconsin succeeding as well. To be honest with you, University of Wisconsin was one of my son's favorite schools until he went there. when, when he
Well,
went there,
he didn't go on game day. Evidently,
no,
if they
no,
jump around, and it's nuts.
no. It was just he went. He was like, this is more country than he was used to.
So is he a
So
terrier or is he a golden eagle?
no, he goes to Worcester Polytechnic
Okay,
Institute. Yeah, he's a
Wiesta.
yeah, Worcester.
Yes,
Yeah, he's a nerd.
I like how is
he's
that sign language for smart?
Yeah, yep. He's a nerd. He calls me his nerd all the time. So,
That's fine.
but yeah, we went out there, and there and University of Minnesota, and I told him if he chose University of Minnesota, I would never visit him or help him travel ever, because it was negative 17 degrees when we visited,
Uh,
so it wasn't happening. But yeah, I think it's a really great hire, and you know, as we were talking about earlier, Nebraska with Matt Rule, that's probably the other big name out there. Not
right.
because of credentials or good things, but more the storyline, him getting let go from Carolina, getting all that guaranteed money, and then going to over to Nebraska. But how do you feel about that hire?
I've got a soft spot for Matt Rule, and I think the reason why is growing up in Pennsylvania, I was always a Penn State guy. Um, Still do have a little bit of Penn State in my heart, so to speak. Always was a big fan of theirs. Rule was a Penn State guy, offensive lineman. But when you look at Nebraska, it's probably the one job next to Colorado, because Nebraska and Colorado were the same programs as far as, they were battling in the same recruiting areas in the 80s, and they were fighting for a lot of the same players, and they were both really, really successful in the California and East Coast, like Jersey and New York City, New York areas, and just marquee teams back in the 80s and 90s. And Nebraska is the one program where, Wisconsin, not so much. I think Wisconsin will have quick success behind Luke Fickell. But when you look at Nebraska and why have they been so poor? And some of the coaching hires that they made have been so have been puzzling. Now you would think Scott Frost would have hit it out of the park, considering he was a Nebraska guy. He played in Nebraska, had tremendous success as an OC at Oregon, head coach at UCF. Um, they had oh, I can't remember my man's name. Um, um, he was from Youngstown. He was another Bob Stoops guy. He was there. He was there for a while. They had good success. Pelini, I believe, was his name. They had good success under him, but they ended up firing him. Rule is a reclamation expert. Okay, Rule is a guy that can come into programs that are struggling, make them believe, get good talent, and be successful. Anybody that can take Temple to a 10-4 and 10-3 record in 2 years in a row is a damn genius. Okay, and that's the way I look at it. He came to Baylor after that, after after the whole Art Briles situation, took over for Jim Grobe, who was the interim head coach. Grobe was the head coach at Wake Forest for a while. He comes there and he has a kind of a mediocre first couple years. Then he goes 7-6. Then he goes 11-3, and he gets the Panthers job. As we know, Nick Saban is the poster boy for this. Some can coach in the college, some
Yeah.
cannot. Rule probably was cursed by a lack of a marquee quarterback more than anything. Kind of what I think Frank Reich was cursed by, a lack of a marquee quarterback. You had names that should be good, but they weren't. I think Matt Rule's tremendous head coach. I think he's going to put a tremendous staff together. We talked about it earlier. He got the defense coordinator from Syracuse. What they have to do, and Trev Alberts, I don't know if you remember Trev Alberts. He was a former Nebraska defensive end, a first-round pick by the Indianapolis Colts. We played against him back in the day, had some injury issues, and didn't play very, very long. But he is the athletic director.
Okay.
They gave Matt Rule an 8-year contract.
Yep.
And people would say, why in the hell would you give him an 8-year contract? Well, that's more symbolic than anything. It's symbolism. And what that symbolism is, it's saying with an 8-year contract, we're going to be patient, and we're going to allow him to build this thing properly. And now, will that happen? If he's not doing very well, probably not.
Well,
But
I'll tell you
there's
what,
still
I
some
wish
symbolism to it,
I
you
need
know?
yeah, I need his agent, because to have a guy who's able to figure out a way to get guaranteed
Right,
money the way he has over
right,
15 years and
right.
not have to do a thing at this point in time, because he got let go from the Panthers and got all that money, and now, a year or two down the road, Nebraska could be like, "Bye," and he's going to get all that money too. So, or at least get bought out. I'm sure they'll figure something out. But yeah, I think it's
He
crazy.
is. I think he's a very good head coach. I really do. I think we're going to see Carolina be the next. I don't want to put this evil on them and say they're going to be the next Redskins, but their owner's a little bit eclectic. He's a little out there, okay, and I think you're seeing that in Indianapolis. I mean, Irsay is a little bit goofy, right? You got
Yeah,
Irsay, you've got
whatever they're doing there.
Snyder stuff is starting to hit the fan today. They talked
Yep.
about Snyder is the one to release the Bruce Allen emails that led to John Gruden having to resign from the
Hmm.
Raiders.
Yeah.
So it's there's some guys out there that just maybe they have the money, but as far as
Right.
NFL owners, they're not very very good. But we'll see. I mean, there's a
All
few
right.
others. Satterfield took over for Finkel at Cincinnati, and then
Cincinnati.
Jeff
Yeah.
Brom. Yeah, Jeff Brom, who was the head coach at Purdue. It was announced today that he's moving on and going back to his home where he played, Louisville. And he's there. Of course, Kevin Wilson, the offensive coordinator of Ohio State, has moved on to Tulsa. So I'll see a lot of him. Really don't care to talk about Hugh Freeze, Sarah. We'll let that one go.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about the rest. It's fine. I just wanted to list out, the different ones that have already happened, and
Right, and then
there's a lot
Barry
of
Odom, the
people.
UNLV.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have been, calling for several other coaches' heads. But we'll see how the rest of the bowl season plays out and who else is let go and hired, and I'm sure we'll talk about more. But let's switch gears a little bit to the NFL, and
Well, let's
we all
talk
rec-
about it.
we
Let's get
all
it out there.
received some really bad news yesterday. Von Miller season ending IR. He goes into Texas has a knee scope planned, exploratory, they called it, and
Right.
walks out the next day, basically with ACL surgery and out for the rest of the season, and now probably out for good half of 2023. So,
Well,
how do you feel?
I counted it up. I think the beginning of the season is about 9 months, is it not?
Yeah, it happened on Thanksgiving, which is the exact day that happened for Trey White last year. So,
Right.
Trey White didn't come back until Thanksgiving this year, and he played, 15 or 16 snaps. So, um, not saying that they're the same person, they're going to recover at the same time. Some of it could have been a little bit of Trey White in his own head, based on some reports that he could have probably returned a little earlier. Um, but at this point in time, I guess as a former player, is this deflating to the team? Does, you can't really say next man up when it comes to Von Miller because there
Right.
really isn't. It's who's going to step up, but no one's going to replace him. And then that huge, it's hard to say and you hate to say it, but that huge cap hit, um and he's not going to be available during the most important stretch, and then again the beginning of next year. And someone Brandon Bean was on yesterday, and he deflected it really well, but there was a question that, do you regret bringing him on? And he was like, absolutely not. He has been worth every single cent that we have, paid him just from his presence being here. And supposedly, as soon as he is healed up over the next week or two, he's going to come back to Buffalo and he'll be on the sidelines, which I think is huge. But, how do you feel about losing him, and what do you think the team feels at this point? And then how do we move forward?
Real quick, when you talk about this injury, and I'm gonna be transparent. I'm a medical device sales rep.
Hmm.
I'm in sports medicine. I'm not sitting here saying I'm a doctor. But what I am saying is I sit in on about 100 of these a year, and there's now four different styles of graft that they can use to repair the ACL: hamstring, patella tendon, quad tendon, and allograft, which is a cadaver tendon, usually a perineal tendon. But when you talk about an ACL, and I think everybody's like, well, how come they didn't know right away? How come they didn't see it on the MRI? What some when you tear a ligament like that, they don't just grow back together. They're never the way they were. So he could have stretched this thing and torn a bunch of the tissue to where it didn't rupture all the way, and he still had some of his ACL left. So it made it look like on the test there was a negative drawer test and things like that, which are some of the things they do to. If you
Right.
ever see a guy out on the field, he does it, and they'll start moving his knee like this. They're checking to see if there's an endpoint to that slide. They didn't know definitively, not even off the MRI until they got in there. But there is no like wait and rest, and this thing will rejuvenate, heal up, and you can play. You've got to get it fixed. It's just the way it is. And I would imagine his was probably a partial tear or something of that nature, and you have to you take an ACL that's a partial tear and you treat it just like it is a torn ACL, and you have to repair it. Depending upon on what form that they use as far as the graft will kind of determine a little bit of maybe how quick he can come back or some other things. But in this day and age, the science that we have to fix ACL injuries, players come back sooner than ever. I remember back when I played, you tore an ACL, it was a year, 12 months, boom, that is it. There's nothing sooner. Then it started creeping up sooner, and you've seen some people try to come back in 6, 7 months. Um, I think it's a little bit harder for a guy like Trey White playing defensive back and the amount of cutting and backpedaling and things that he does. Vaughn's, more of a straight guy. Obviously, he's rushing the passer. He will have some lag as far as, getting back into game speed and all those things. You can get as strong as you want on the rehab, but there are some peripheral things that you have to work on. And you just get that through playing and through reps. So, as far as losing them, I mean, you don't replace guys like Von Miller. He's a tremendous player. What we brought him in to do, he was doing on this, so far this season. He was drawing two blockers, tons of attention. It was allowing other guys to be freed up and make plays. Um, I don't think that you can't sign a guy like Vaughn and something like this happens and then go, well, we should have never signed him.
Right.
Injuries happen
I
to
agree.
anybody. I mean, they happen to anybody. It's just part of the game. And what happened to him wasn't anything that was even violent. It was just kind of a misstep and a bit
Yeah.
of bad luck. Having him in that locker room will be immense. He'll continue to be the second defensive line coach, helping guys like Rousseau and Ed Oliver, and he'll be ready to go next year. I think one thing that Von Miller has done throughout his career, he's been a tremendous workout guy. He'll rehabilitate and attack it just like he does games, and I have no worries that he'll play next year. Maybe not the first couple, but he will play by halfway through the season.
Agreed. Agreed. I mean, I feel like there's a there's a missing piece now that he's not going to be there, but I feel like, especially because the guys know that he's watching, that you have people like Shaq Lawson and you have people like Gregory Rousseau and, hopefully Boogie Basham. Those are the guys that are going to have to step up and make their presence known and felt. And go ahead.
Well, here's a question. Here's a question for you. Do we have the same football team we had next year now with him not on it, or do you think we've progressed and have gotten better as a football team, even without Von Miller playing defensive end on Sundays?
I feel like bringing him on has made our team better even when he doesn't play. And I know that sounds, weird, but I think it's more what he's taught the guys in preparation, what he's taught the guys in the off season, having the young guys go to his camp. I see a change in Rousseau, and I'm upset that Rousseau's been, has had that high ankle sprain this year because I feel like he hasn't had a chance to just go off. He started it at the beginning of the year. He had, 4.5 sacks to start the year, and I'm hoping that he gets that opportunity now. Shaq Lawson, for some reason, he can be a bum wherever he wants to play, but when he comes and plays in Buffalo, he's just different. You could tell he wants to be out there and he plays with heart. And he's not always going to be the best player. He's not always going to take the right angles, and we can all get angry at him at different times, but there's nobody out there that plays with as much passion and heart other than maybe Jordan Phillips, who goes out there and
That's who I'm really concerned about, to be
eh,
honest with you.
you're concerned like what
Yeah,
with
when
him
he
not.
got hurt last week, when he dove
Yeah.
for the quarterback, landed on his arm, it was and we have our own resident expert here on Buffalo Rumblings with banged up Bills. But when you watch that mechanism, he lands on that outstretched shoulder. That's usually a bad one as far as
Yeah.
instability and all that.
And I felt bad because in that process, I kind of laughed it off, and I was like, he's just got the wind knocked out of him. I'm like, he
Right,
ran probably 75 yards trying to get after
right.
Mac Jones, trying to sack him in that whole instance of that play, ridiculous play, for no reason, and then he dove for him. So it'll be really sad to see with him being injured, but with that being said, the Bills finally head home. We're finally back in Orchard Park after
Yep.
Snowmageddon, they've been calling it, um, and playing 2 weeks in Detroit, and then obviously in uh, New England, right outside of Boston, so Foxborough. Um, but with that, today we found out Milano did not practice again 2 weeks in a row. And that's I think my biggest concern going into the Jets game is without Vaughn. I was excited that we finally had pieces back. We had Rousseau back, we had Milano back, we had White back, three of which didn't play against the Jets the first time around. So to know that Milano hasn't played 2 weeks in a row gets me a little nervous because I like to see him and Edmonds on the field together.
I agree. I think they're tremendous. They're like peanut. I don't know if you would say peanut butter and
Peanut butter
jelly
and
or whatever,
jelly.
but jelly's good by
Mhm.
itself, and peanut butter's good by itself. But when they're together, they're really good, right? What was that old Reese's commercial? Remember that the person would be in the kitchen and they'd have like the chocolate bar and they'd stumble and they'd fall and the chocolate went into the peanut butter. It's like it's.
Oh,
I don't know, man. When I look at this, I think Edmonds is such a tremendous player. I think Milano is such a tremendous player. They're unbelievable together because they complement each other so well. And again, that's where up the middle. And I worry about them guys not being totally healthy and in there. And then I really worry about Phillips because I think we do not have much size inside. I don't care what anybody says. I think the team's been different. I mean, obviously Vaughn was a huge addition, but I think Jordan Phillips coming back has been a big deal. Just size up the middle, and then of course we got to get the Jets now. We're all wearing what's White's first name, the quarterback. Now we're wearing
Mike White.
T-shirts, and yeah, we're going to rally around Mike White, and it's bad enough we had to lose to him the first time. They gave us their best shot. We got the Bills coming in. We're going to get after them because they're injured. Now we got this whole fiasco going on. So hopefully we can stop their momentum early. But I think the stats are out there, and when you look at it, I think only one other team has lost more man hours to injury than the Bills. And I'm hoping. I mean, I'm just. And Richard makes a comment. Richard Russ. I'm hoping the tear was too small to see on the MRI. Again, that's usually not how that works, but hopefully that might happen. But I look at our team and I haven't been to their practices. Okay, I can't comment on their practices and I can't comment on their training. But when I look at this season and I look at the amount of injuries we have had and the way we didn't handle the heat early in the season, I have to wonder about how I wonder about our performance training. I wonder about our strength room, our weight room rather, and I worry about maybe how we actually hook up in practice.
And
There's
that's
something going on.
it's ironic because the last couple of years we've been kind of touted the lucky team, or the
Right,
team that has one of the best not only
right,
facilities but trainers and we've remained so healthy for the most part other than obviously Trey White last year. But
right.
you know it's been kind of our benefit over the last couple of years, and then this year it is just obviously, and then the year that we're dubbed Super Bowl favorites, that
Well,
we've
I'm being
had to
sarcastic, Sarah. I'm being
fight.
sarcastic, but getting in a float tub and in a cryo booth doesn't prepare you to take a beating from
Right.
adults every weekend. I mean,
I hear you.
your body has to acclimate to the contact a little bit. You got to have some face some adversity through practice.
Yeah.
But
So
like I said,
last
I can't say because I wasn't there. So
Yeah. So last week, we saw some pretty good things come out of Cook in our running game.
yes,
Singletary has been playing consistent, which makes me happy over the last few weeks. And then James Cook has not. But last 2 weeks ago, they basically didn't include him at all after a couple of carries. Last week they said, let's give it to him, and he went kind of nuts. And I was very, very excited to see. And
yes.
actually, this week they have him on a lot of fantasy football waiver wire. As if he's available, get him. Which shows that people are kind of confident that the Bills might switch it up. I still think Singletary should be our back, our RB1. I just think that um we need to figure out ways to get Cook involved. And I actually liked that we had 4 or 5 plays with Cook and Hines on the field together. And I actually thought that that was a different look, and I liked seeing it because it was okay, are they going to hand it off, are they going to dump it off? If they do dump it off, who are they dumping it off to? It was kind of an interesting look, and successful too. So, how do you feel about the Bills' running game, and are we turning it on at the right time, or do you think it was a little bit of a fluke?
I don't know, but I will say is this I don't know about turning it on, but the Bills have had at least 100 yards rushing every game this season.
It's all Josh Allen. No,
But
I
is
mean
it
Josh.
but is it a running game?
Josh has, yeah, it is. But what we've always said is that we don't want Josh to be the running game, and
But
he is still the running game.
if you don't give the ball to the running backs and you keep calling your quarterback to run the ball, is that the running back's fault?
No, it's not. It's not. And it's also not the quarterback's fault when, he's doing better than your running backs. But I honestly think that when it comes to Josh, I like some of the scripted runs. Like I like them as long as, as long as he protects himself in the process as much
Has
as
he
he
played
possibly
better the
can.
last couple weeks,
Josh,
Josh?
I feel like he has. I feel like I still go back to his injury against the Jets, and I still think it was a little mental. I look at that throw that he threw, and yes, people can say that it was, that spur of the moment thing where he had the adrenaline and everything. But I look at it as he threw that ball 70 something yards and didn't flinch. I think that he got hit so hard the week before in Green Bay, and somebody else brought this up to me. We had, I went back and looked at it, and we had this conversation about it. He might have like just had, I don't want to say his bell rung or concussion or anything like that, but I feel like it's been a little a little a mental thing, a mental block over the last couple of weeks. I do feel like he got back to himself a little bit this week. He didn't look great, playing against Cleveland. He didn't look great playing against Detroit. I think he looked pretty darn good playing against um the Patriots, even though he wasn't throwing 350 yards and running for 100. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he takes this Jets game back and being back at home, because he does normally play well at home. So I'm looking forward to it. The one thing I wanted to point out is it is a 70% chance of rain
Mm-hmm.
on Sunday. So it does look like, we'll probably be running the ball more. Obviously there's no reason why Josh can't throw in the rain. Um, but the weather is forecasted, and it's supposed to be between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. that the rain is pretty consistent. So, and it's going to be cold, 39 degrees and rain.
I agree with Calgary Mafia, and he says it seems to him like some contact brings Allen into focus. I saw last that Thursday night game. I like when he runs the ball and he gets up and he looks at somebody, gives him a little bit of a stare. I think he plays. I think he plays better that way. I like him running the ball because I think it puts him into it puts him into the game. But I will say it again, and I'm going to preach this because there's a lot of naysayers. Last time I checked, we have 100 yards or more rushing every football game.
Yeah, yeah, and
I
we're one
think
of the
that's
top teams.
pretty. I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think
You
we
know,
average 132 or something like that. We're actually one of
we have a
the
top 10 running game for a team that can't run the ball,
again,
but
Josh
we don't
Allen.
have a top 10 turnover ratio. That's a big
Yeah.
difference.
Well,
So,
and Josh has been better with that. And I'm from New York. We do this whole knock on wood thing. I don't want
ooh,
to jinx him. The last couple of weeks he's protected the ball. Last 3 weeks I think he's had one turnover. I don't quote me on that, but out of the just thinking about it, I think he's only had one. So which he was having two or three a game. So I'll take one over 3 weeks. So um with that being said, do you have a prediction for Sunday?
do I have a prediction? I believe that the Bills will play a tight first half. They will stretch it out into the second half, and they will win let's see here, 27-17 ball
That's
game.
my score. That is my score, 27-17. They are 9.5 point favorites. So
Yes.
I did it as picking them with the spread with the points. So 27-17. I
I
like it.
hope it rains. I want it to rain. This is the
I
time of
don't.
year. This is the time of year that the Bills are supposed to. They're
Uh,
supposed to be an advantage to being in the
Jerry,
city
I'm
of.
gonna come home with pneumonia.
We'll do all right.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll make it. We'll
I
make it.
packed my
You can just
poncho,
hold
but
up cue cards. Just hold up cards.
I packed my poncho, so
We'll be
hopefully
like, Sarah,
it,
what do you think? Sarah, what do you think of that?
like, all right. Well, why don't you take us out? We went a couple minutes over today.
Hey, no problem. But hey, we appreciate you listening and watching the Three Man Rush. She is Sara Larson. I'm the big O, Jerry Ostrowski. Spence told me I have to come up with a catchy saying at the end of this thing. All
Yeah,
right.
we got to figure that out. And I need a nickname because, y'all have some cool
Yep.
nicknames, and I'm tired of working with The Voice and The King and Big O, and I'm just boring old Sarah, so we got to figure that one out.
I tend to always say "Go Bills, One Love."
There you go.
I don't know, but I also like "What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding." One
Hey,
of my favorite songs by now. Of course, I'm not going to remember who it is. I can sing the song, and I can't even remember who sings it. Elvis Costello. Um, but anyway, again, she's Sarah Larson. I'm the Big O Jerry Ostrowski, and go Bills, one love.
go Bills.